Hello and welcome to another one of my thoughts videos. In this one I'm going to start a new thread of the universe, our origins and astronomy and all sorts of things like that. It's a topic that I've been interested in for quite a number of years, even since I was a child. In fact, when I was in primary school, I think, or middle school, just before high school, we had a science project where I wrote an essay on the Big Bang theory, and I even made it into a little booklet and I got top marks. I now know that that theory is basically primary school level, and so now I'd like to delve into some other things that are a little bit more complex and a little bit more thought-provoking. You may not agree with any of this, but these are my thoughts. Our origins and where we have come from is a question that many philosophers throughout the centuries have been questioning, and in more recent times we have a lot of science to investigate a lot of those concrete things, and a lot of theories go around. I am surprised though that the thoughts that have been recorded centuries ago have often been disregarded, or the sciences that we have like astronomy and physics and things, they don't seem to coordinate sufficiently into a coherent story to see where we come from. So I would like to pull together a lot of different areas that I have studied throughout the years and sort of round it up and conclude before I leave the planet. I want to leave this little note for you as to where or how our universe came into being. When I was young, my dad had a pair of very good binoculars, and occasionally we would take them out and look at the moon. It was impressive how big and clear that object was. Now in history, many people like me, who was old enough to be before internet and basically television and things, spent a lot of time looking at the stars. When I visit indigenous people, you can get a feel for that. When the sun goes down, without electricity, there's nothing to do but stare at the stars or go to sleep. So many people in the past memorized those constellations, the stars, noticed that some shift, that some don't, and all that sort of thing. And they got very good at understanding where we fit in our solar system, in our universe, impressively when you consider the lack of telescopes and electronics and all of that sort of thing. Even more than 2,000 years ago, the Greeks managed to make a clockwork mechanism out of brass, which was able to calculate certain planets, at least 5 planets that they knew, and the sun and our orbit. It even had gears that could compensate for the elliptical shape of our orbit. And how they figured that out is extremely impressive. Now, the first books ever written recording our history, the Bible, basically a collection of books that in the first book of Genesis records where we came from. It is surprising to me that the scientists of today, how they ignore a whole heap of things. They ignore things like the clockwork mechanism of, well, maybe they don't ignore it, but anyway, they tend to try and look for alternatives rather than what is written in the Bible. Some people have issues with the Bible and say it's a fable, 7 days, the world created in 7 days. But what people don't understand, it is a very scientific book, but it's like a very cryptic postcard summary of an encyclopedia of information. So you have to look at that book from that point of view. When I first read the account, I too was skeptical. I said, this is crazy, it's a fable. But the more I thought about things and studied astronomy, physics and all sorts of things, I came to realize the cryptic nature of this book. You've got to realize, for example, the 7 days that it was talking about don't rely on our sun, because when you think about it, as recorded in day 3 or day 4, our sun wasn't even created until day 4. So how can you have 4 previous days or 3 previous days if you didn't have a sun to mark that? It's periods of time. Those times you figure out whether it is literal or figurative. I tend to think it's figurative. One thing that astounded me or had me confused for years was how in the fourth day it said it create the stars and moons. No, it does not mention the moon. It said that the stars were formed and that we had two suns. One was a larger one and a smaller one. The larger one to govern the day and the smaller one to govern the night. It always confused me, and I thought, oh, the smaller light was the moon. But in actual fact, the moon is not a light. In recent years, maybe half a dozen or so ago, I started to look at that more literally as it is written. Is it possible that our universe is bisolar? And then lo and behold, from 1983, I think it was, onwards, and then it was supposedly postulated that our solar system has two suns, even though you can't see them. Only one of them. Supposedly, NASA in 85 agreed that that was possible. And by 2011, there was debate, and supposedly some astronomers in Spain found this second sun. By 2013, that was discredited, and all of that thought disappeared. I, at the time when way back in 2009 and 2011, around there, was like, oh wow, look, they've finally found our second sun. It's a brown dwarf. But then all of that disappeared in 2013, and I had to consider, was it a scam? Was it truth or untruth? And then lately, as we get into the 2020s, we find that the astronomers have enough of the evidence associated with that possible discovery is consistent, like comets going around particular orbits, and they are looking for what they're calling at the moment Planet X, another planet in our solar system. It amazes me that they haven't put two and two together to figure out that we actually have a second sun in our solar system. It's a smaller one, and it's a brown dwarf. A sun that does not emit visible light, and it's way past Pluto. I'd like to look at a little bit of the evidences of that, but this is where my in-depth studies really began to take form when I realized that our system is a bisolar system. We have two suns. I find it difficult to find anybody who's even interested in the topic. I get excited about it because it has huge implications that our system is bisolar. It explains a lot of things and anomalies, and it explains how also, according to written records and logic and astronomy, that it indicates why and how we are at the moment. And I'm surprised that the astronomers and academics aren't talking about it more. So there's an introduction to our beginnings, just to give that little piece there, that we live in a bisolar system. And in this thread, we'll look at a lot more detail of that and a lot more of the consequences of that, evidences that I've just talked about now as to how we have two suns in our solar system and what that means to us.